Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The air between us had always carried a weight, a tension that neither words nor excuses could fully erase. That evening it pressed heavier, as if every glance, every unspoken thought, was amplified in the dim glow of the living room. She lingered just a little too close, her smile teasing the edges of something forbidden, and I felt it, a spark that had been smoldering quietly, waiting for permission to ignite. My husband was there, unaware of the subtle war being waged through silent glances and loaded gestures, the kind of charged encounter that leaves hearts racing without a single word spoken. I could feel her gaze on me, sharp yet playful, weighing my every move. There was a challenge in it, a teasing accusation I couldn't ignore. The thought of what she had whispered earlier about the noises I supposedly didn't make lingered in my mind like a dare I couldn't resist. It wasn't just about proving her wrong. It was about exploring something we'd never allowed ourselves to admit: curiosity, desire, the magnetic pull of someone who shouldn't exist in this moment. Everything seemed to slow, the world narrowing to the tension between what was said, what was unspoken, and the possibilities that hung between us. I could feel the boundaries blur, the rules we had lived by stretching thin, and a dangerous thrill coursed through me. By the time the night settled into a hush, the air thick with anticipation, I knew something irreversible had begun. The story wasn't just about temptation, it was about the choices that make the heart race, the heat of daring, and the moments that leave you gasping for more. The room seemed to shrink around us, the soft hum of the evening settling like a quiet accomplice to our thoughts. I caught his glance from across the room, a fleeting spark that lingered just a heartbeat too long. My pulse responded before my mind could protest, reminding me that what we felt wasn't merely curiosity, it was a slow, undeniable pull. I shifted slightly, brushing my fingers against his arm in what could have been an accident, yet the warmth that spread between us told a different story. She laughed softly at something he said, but her eyes never left mine, like a challenge I wasn't sure I could or wanted to meet. Every gesture, every pause in conversation carried a weight we were both aware of. A lean closer, a hand resting momentarily where it shouldn't, and the air between us seemed to thrum. Words weren't necessary. The tension spoke in sighs and sideways glances, in the quiet ways our presence tangled without a single overt motion. I could feel the conflict coil inside me, a tug-of-war between desire and restraint. His attention, though polite and casual on the surface, carried a magnetism I couldn't ignore. And yet there was hesitation too, an invisible line we hadn't crossed, the shadow of commitment, of what should be. It made every look heavier, every accidental brush more electric. We lingered near the couch, a mere foot apart, and for a moment the world narrowed to just us. I wanted to speak, to bridge the distance, but fear, anticipation, and a fragile self-restraint held my lips sealed. He mirrored the same struggle, eyes flicking from my face to my hands, then back again, caught between curiosity and conscience. The tension coiled tighter, a melody of unsaid words, half smiles, and the silent promise that nothing would ever feel the same again. The quiet of the room felt heavier now, like the air itself was aware of what neither of us would voice. Every glance carried a question we dared not speak aloud. Every movement a subtle test of limits. I felt my chest tighten as he shifted slightly closer, the faintest brush of his hand against mine sending a spark racing through me. I wanted to close the gap, to lean in, but my heart held back, tangled in loyalty, habit, and the unspoken fear of what crossing that line could mean. She noticed too, catching the almost imperceptible change in our posture, and her knowing smile only made the air feel denser. Secrets hung between us like invisible chains, binding desire with hesitation. There were stories untold, promises made long ago, and unspoken rules that neither of us wanted to break but somehow could not ignore. Every accidental touch, every shared laugh that lingered too long became a whispered confession in a room otherwise filled with polite conversation. I watched him as he laughed at something trivial, but his eyes found mine in the pause that followed, a silent acknowledgement of the tension threading through us. A thought, dangerous, fleeting, flashed across my mind. What if we let the moment take us? I could feel the pull of curiosity, the ache of longing, but my fingers recoiled before they could trace the line between comfort and confession. He hesitated too, leaning slightly, then retreating, as if fearing the very gravity that drew us together. The weight of everything unsaid pressed on my shoulders. It wasn't about words or actions, it was about connection, restraint, and the magnetic force of desire restrained by our own moral gravity. The room, once familiar, now felt charged, as if every shadow and soft glow carried a meaning only we could decode. And even as we sat there, inches apart, the tension whispered one undeniable truth. No one could stay indifferent for long, and the question was not if something would happen, but when and at what cost. The room seemed to shrink with each heartbeat, the space between us crackling with an energy that was almost tangible. Every glance, every subtle movement felt amplified, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, subtle and steady, and it made my chest ache in a way I had never anticipated. Our eyes met, and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. There was only this suspended electric now. A laugh escaped me, soft, nervous and unsteady, and he leaned slightly closer, the distance between us thinner than it had ever been. The brush of his hand against mine was deliberate yet hesitant, a spark that raced along nerves I hadn't realized were waiting. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but the words caught in my throat, fragile and vulnerable. Instead, I let my eyes convey what my lips could not: longing, curiosity and a trembling desire tempered by restraint. She noticed too, her presence a gentle counterpoint to the charged atmosphere, yet she said nothing. Her quiet acknowledgement only made the air thicker, more electric, as if we were orbiting around a center too intense to name. I could feel the pull, the gravity between us, every unspoken thought pressing closer. His gaze lingered on me, searching, questioning, daring, and I realized I was holding my breath, caught in a moment that could fracture or ignite. A soft whisper slipped from his lips, almost inaudible, yet it resonated deep inside me. I tilted my head, drawn by the sound, and it felt like the distance had disappeared entirely. Fingers grazed in what could have been accident yet carried the weight of intention. Our hearts seemed to synchronize in that space, rapid and insistent, every pulse a declaration neither of us dared voice. Time itself appeared suspended, the room a stage for our own unspoken confession. I wanted to lean in, to close the gap, yet restraint held me taut, a delicious tension that made every second linger. And in that charged pause, with breath mingling, eyes locked and nerves alight, I felt it, the undeniable, almost unbearable heat of possibility. It was the moment before surrender, the suspended note before the crescendo, and I knew with every fiber of my being that nothing would ever be the same again. The rain tapped gently against the window, a soft rhythmic melody that seemed to mirror the quickening beat of our hearts. The room was bathed in the warm glow of scattered lamps, shadows dancing along the walls as if they too were caught in the suspended moment between us. I could feel the heat of him near me, the steady warmth radiating from his presence, and it made the air thick with longing, heavy with words we couldn't say. Her eyes found mine across the room, then softened, as if granting permission for the moment we had been circling all evening. Every glance, every pause, every heartbeat seemed magnified. His hand brushed mine, slow, almost accidental, yet it carried the weight of a confession neither of us had dared voice. My breath caught, and the tiny shiver that ran down my spine spoke louder than words ever could. We moved closer without speaking, each step measured, deliberate, as if we were aware that this was both the crescendo and the beginning of something we had been denying. The space between us seemed electric, alive with possibility. Her presence behind us became a gentle reminder of the world outside this bubble, yet irrelevant now. All that existed was the warmth of his hand over mine, the curve of his shoulder brushing against mine, and the quiet exchange that passed through our eyes. Our breaths mingled, slow and hesitant at first, then deeper, more insistent. His gaze traced the line of my jaw, lingered on the subtle rise and fall of my chest, and I felt it, an undeniable connection, a surrender not of bodies but of hearts. The room seemed to shrink until the world consisted only of us, the hum of the rain, the faint scent of candles, the electric tension of a desire finally unbound. In that perfect silence our hearts spoke louder than any words could. Every fleeting brush of our hands, every shared smile and every breath that melted into the others was a language only we understood. I realized that what we had been chasing all evening was not a moment of passion but the exquisite truth of being completely seen and felt. In that quiet, luminous night, the world held its breath with us, and everything else simply faded away. Morning light seeped through the curtains, pale and diffused, washing the room in quiet gold. The world outside seemed ordinary, oblivious to the storm of emotions lingering within. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, shoulders tense, as if bracing against the weight of unspoken thoughts. I lingered nearby, wrapped in a soft throe, heart still thrumming from the night before, unsure if I wanted to speak or stay suspended in silence. The air was thick with aftermath. There was no shame, only the delicate ache of realization our choices had altered the contours of our lives in ways neither of us could reverse. Every glance exchanged carried both acknowledgement and hesitation, the invisible threads of connection stronger than ever. His hand hovered near mine but didn't touch. The restraint was a conscious act, a mutual understanding that what we had was fragile, precious and complicated. Outside, the first sounds of morning, the distant hum of traffic, a bird tapping at the window made the room feel simultaneously intimate and absurdly ordinary. The intimacy of the night had created a bridge between us, one paved with vulnerability and trust, yet now we were left to navigate its consequences. My mind raced. Was it love that had fueled our closeness or an escape from what we had been denying ourselves all along? A sudden knock at the door startled us, a sharp contrast to the languid stillness inside. We froze. The uninvited visitor, a reminder that life outside our bubble still demanded answers. A familiar voice called out, teasing yet curious, and I realized that whatever was unfolding between us now had a ripple effect we hadn't anticipated. For a moment, fear and excitement collided, the kind of feeling that left your chest tight but your heart impossibly alive. We didn't speak immediately. Instead, we shared a look that held everything: curiosity, guilt, longing, and the tentative hope that whatever had begun between us was more than fleeting. And in that quiet, suspended morning, the truth was undeniable. The night had changed us, awakened something undeniable, and left us standing at the edge of choice, hearts beating faster than we could name. Whatever came next, we would face it together, aware, vulnerable, and impossibly connected. The morning had settled into a quiet rhythm, soft light spilling across the room, painting every surface with gentle warmth. The night's intensity had left its mark, not in chaos or regret, but in an unspoken bond that neither of us could ignore. We sat near each other, shoulders brushing, breath slowing, the weight of what had transpired settling like a soft, almost sacred hush. His hand found mine, tentative at first, but once there it fit with a natural ease, a silent reassurance that nothing had been lost and yet everything had changed. Our eyes met and I saw in them a reflection of my own pulse, curiosity tempered by care, desire softened by respect, and a willingness to navigate the new terrain together. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping confessions. Instead, there was a quiet choice to be present, to linger in the afterglow of a night that had stretched beyond bodies into the depths of hearts. We spoke little. Words felt unnecessary, even inadequate. Each glance, each subtle touch, each shared breath conveyed more than language ever could. The room felt like its own universe, suspended in time, where vulnerability had been met with understanding and longing had been met with grace. There was no rush, no need to fill the space with conversation or explanations. The world outside could wait. Right now, all that mattered was the fragile intimacy we were learning to inhabit. She, watching from the background, smiled softly, not with envy but with acknowledgement, a quiet blessing of sorts. She had witnessed the unspoken connection, the tension released, the surrender of hearts, and in her subtle presence the story felt whole. There was no chaos, no scandal, just the poetry of human hearts finding their rhythm together, however complicated. Hours passed in slow, deliberate quiet. At one point he leaned in, forehead resting lightly against mine, and I felt my heart beat slow, my chest warm. It was a gesture without grandeur, but it carried everything: trust, desire, safety, and the unspoken promise that whatever came next we would meet it side by side. Time no longer seemed linear, each second stretched, full of tenderness and unspoken vows. When the moment finally broke, it was with gentle laughter, a shared memory of tension and curiosity transformed into understanding. We had crossed thresholds, not in bodies but in hearts, and emerged with a new kind of closeness, one that carried both heat and grace, daring and comfort. The story of the night would linger in memory, a fragrance of longing and liberation, sweet and persistent, shaping every glance and smile that followed. In the quiet that remained, I realized something essential. Love and desire do not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they settle like sunlight across a room, warming everything it touches, quiet yet unforgettable. And as we sat together, hands entwined, hearts choosing to be near, I understood that connection is not always loud or dramatic. It is patient, steady, and ultimately transformative. The night had changed us, but morning had brought clarity. Whatever had begun, it was ours to nurture, respect, and savor.